Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Litchfield School District bond hearing. It is January 11th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order, or the hearing to order, and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to come out tonight. We really appreciate it. Moving into, is this the right presentation? Yes. The purpose of the bond hearing tonight, there are multiple purposes. To share the draft warrant with the public so they're aware of the language, to share preliminary, and I underline preliminary financing concepts, to receive public input about the bond proposal. We would like to make clear that the purpose of the bond hearing is not to discuss the merits of whether or not we should move forward with the project. That will happen at our January 17th meeting, where the school board will be talking about and voting on the language of Article 1. But for tonight, it is to talk about the bond itself and what that means and what that looks like. I would like to turn the microphone over to our board member and budget committee member, Andrew Cutter, who is going to go ahead and read the proposed warrant article and guide us through some slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So the proposed warrant article 1 for the bond will read as follows. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $44,290,000 to fund the design, construction, original equipping, and related costs of the new Litchfield Elementary School on school district land near the current Griffin Memorial School, with $38,617,870 of such sum to be raised by the issuance of bonds or notes in compliance with the Municipal Finance Act, RSA 33-1, as amended, with such bonds or notes to be issued in phases over multiple years in amounts to be determined by the school board, which amounts shall not in the aggregate exceed $38,617,870, and with $5,672,130 of such sum to come from state building aid, to authorize the school board to issue, negotiate, sell, and deliver said bonds and notes, and to determine the rate of interest thereon and the maturity or other terms thereof, to authorize the school board to apply for, obtain, accept, and expend federal or state aid, including state building aid or other aid, if any, which may be available for said project, to authorize the school board to take any other action or to pass any other vote relative thereto, and finally to raise and appropriate the additional sum of, to be determined depending upon the school board voting, for the first year's payment on the bond. This article is contingent on the award of state building aid, and if such aid is not awarded to the district, this article will be null and void. 3/5 vote is required to approve this article. With that, and to go over some of the numbers in a little bit finer of detail, I'm going to invite our business administrator, Mr. Doug Totten, up to the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Cutter. So as we look through the numbers, we have some known and some unknowns, and we want to be very direct with what those are. So the known, as you can see in the warrant article, is the total cost of the project, as well as the total amount that we would be allowed to finance. So when the total cost of the project was created, it was in conjunction, but mainly with the architect and the construction manager. Both have been hired. But what it does not constitute is a guaranteed maximum price for the project. It does deliver what they believe the project will be, looking at current projects, and then having a contingency on top of that as well. So again, our goal tonight is to provide the numbers, but then also what is known and unknown. So below that is the state building aid. And we'll go over state building aid a little bit more later, but it gets brought to towns in two parts. One is 80% of the maximum amount that you can have, and that is before construction happens. So there's other criteria that have to happen before that, but you get the money before construction starts on the building. And then the final 20% comes possibly at the end after construction, after all the expenses go into the state, then they calculate that as much as how much you'll get up to, again, your maximum. So as we talk about school building aid, what is known is the amount that has been appropriated by the New Hampshire legislature. So they have appropriated $48.7 million. Of that, we were the 5th ranked project. So $35.1 million has been reserved for Rochester and Monadnock, as they have already passed warrants and they are progressing towards the creation of their buildings. So there's $13.6 million remaining. So we have 2 of the top 4 have reserved $35.1 million, and then we have Colebrook and Concord. So Concord is the belief at number 4 that they, if they were offered $13 million, which is what is remaining, that they would pass on that because they would be able to secure $48 million in building aid. And so if they took the $13 million, then they couldn't take more later. So they would pass in order to move to the next year in order to get a larger amount. So it is a lot of people's understanding that Concord is going to pass on the building aid. Colebrook tried for the building aid last year in a warrant. It did not come close to the 60%. So that is where the strong understanding is that they will not get the 60% vote this year as well. But again, we have knowns as far as the amount that has been approved, and we're still in that unknown part whether it would be offered to Litchfield. We have a notice of intent to fund. So many projects, many towns put in for building aid. They got ranked. Not every town got a notice of intent to fund because I don't know if there was like 18 projects, but they know that the $48.7 million isn't going to go down to the 17th or 18th project. So we have a notice to intent, which gives us a guaranteed maximum that they would give us. But at this point, we do not have knowledge that we have the firm building aid. But again, we predict to be offered that if the warrant passes. Interest rates, which has definitely been a talk for a lot of people, whether it be with their mortgage or home equity loans. So we have interest rates up here from the New Hampshire Bond Bank. That is who a lot of schools use in order to get their bonds, because you group together, you use their strong rating, and you're able to get lower interest rates than you typically can get if you go out by yourself as a school or city or district. So we have interest rates which they sold in July of 2023, and they tend to sell twice a year. And then they sold again, and they got their interest rates for January 2024. These are current as of yesterday. So that's when they found out what they sold for. So you can see on average, they went down about 0.29%. So as we are looking forward, it's no surprise, as the Fed talked about possibly cutting interest rates or keeping them level, the market's going to respond after that. And then it will respond even more if and when the Fed does decrease interest rates. So our belief is that this decrease is just setting up further decrease in interest rates as well. As we talk through tonight about the bond, a couple of things we want to always keep in mind is that when we project out, we're projecting out with interest rates that we're not sure of. But in order to have projections, you got to use something. So if you see estimated projections, those are estimated projections. They are not to be used as the known amount moving forward. Bonds for schools tend to have those lower interest rates, partly because we don't pay taxes, and then partly because we can group up with other towns in order to make a stronger pool than an individual home buyer can. So as you look at the previous interest payments and you say, well, I can't get that on my house, it's because of the rating that schools can get for those interest rates and that we're tax exempt. So we can structure our bond in several ways, and a decision hasn't been made on that yet. That's partly for the hearing tonight to hear from the public. So similar to home mortgages, we can do a level payment, but we can also structure in a way where we have a level principal. So when you do that, structure it that way, your payments at the beginning are larger because you're always paying the same amount of principal each year, but you're also starting off with a larger of an interest payment. The benefits of doing that, though, is that you're paying off your interest quicker. Therefore, at the end of the term, your total interest payments will be lower. So the following examples that we're going to use are for level payments. So, and then also, when we have talked about construction loans, they tend to be between 20 and 30 years. They're larger in value. The asset itself is going to last for 20 or more years as well. That's why it kind of matches with those terms. Like we're going to show some with 30 years in a way, but the decision on that hasn't been made as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Cutter.
Thank you. So a couple things I just want to reiterate that we just presented this evening. Number one, the warrant article is written that it's contingent upon the receipt of state building aid, meaning that if we don't receive that $7 million funding thereabouts, the article becomes null and void, and we'll have to go back to the drawing board. All right, that's the way the warrant article is being proposed. Secondly, we feel highly confident that Colebrook and Concord will not be receiving state building aid, and we feel highly confident that that puts Litchfield in a position to receive that $7 million state building aid, which is why we're putting this forward as a warrant article to the voters this year. The bond amount, and as the slide presents here, the bond amount of $38,617,817 would be the bond amount that the taxpayers would be responsible for. It does, we're at the moment have an interest rate of 3.59%. We do believe that phasing in our bond strategy over time allows Litchfield to take advantage of declining interest rates over that same time period, further creating savings to the taxpayer by the tune of millions and millions of dollars, right? So instead of bonding the whole amount all at once, if we take a phased approach, it allows us to get those lower interest rates that are projected throughout the year, and that even a quarter point in interest rate savings can result in $1 million+ savings to the taxpayers. This term here is highlighted at 30 years. I will highlight that, and as Doug, Business Administrator Totten mentioned a moment ago, the board is still very much considering 20-year options as well, and looking at the economics of both 20 and 30-year options to try and make the best decision possible and the most financial, fiscally responsible decision possible. With this model at the moment, and that's what it is, it's a model, the annual payments are $2,104,289. And it's also important to note that the total interest is not included in the warrant article, and that is because legally we're not able to include the interest in that warrant article. We've had many conversations with our legal counsel, as well as our bond counsel as well, and we are not able, the way the warrant article is structured, we are not able to include that interest payment in that number. We will be providing the interest numbers and calculations in voter guides and trying to make it as transparent as possible so everyone can make an educated decision in March. So with the interest as well as the bond, we're projecting the total payments to be $63,128,671. In terms of the timelines, we're moving forward towards a March 2024 vote. So at town meeting in March, I believe it's March 12th. That's when the town will come out and vote. Again, 3/5 majority is required to have this warrant article approved. It's important to note that even though with an affirmative or positive vote in March, it would be a full year before we see any construction beginning on the land. And that's because of all the pre-work that has to happen in order to get to that construction point. It's also being projected that then by August of 2026, in time for the start of the 2026-2027 school year, that construction is complete and we'll be able to move into the new building. So with this, and as you can see, there's pre-work to happen in March of 2024, which makes sense for a bond to cover that work. And then again, towards the end of this year or potentially even early next year, to then take out a bond for the construction work to commence at a lower interest rate as we're projecting the rates will continue to decline over the year. In terms of multiple bonds and notes, and again, kind of that phased strategy, it would allow for that pre-construction bond to happen now and allow for, pending a successful vote in March, it would allow for the the design and the blueprints of the work to happen. And then also another bond for construction. We can use the building aid to offset that. So as Business Administrator Totten mentioned, if we are awarded that building aid, 80% of that comes right up front, right? And so we can use that to offset some of the construction costs and then take out a second bond for the remainder of the construction costs after we've utilized the state building aid. Then finally, towards the bottom here, we would potentially consider a third bond for equipment. If there's desks or supplies needed for the schools, we can bond that, and then any final costs remaining to close the project out. In terms of just kind of estimates, I mean, the board's been asked quite a bit about, all right, well, what does this look like in terms of payments and interest, et cetera? It's really hard to share that with you today because the board next Wednesday at our January 17th meeting, will be kind of voting and taking action on what the right strategy is. Are we talking about a 20-year bond, a 30-year bond? What are those interest rates? What are those projected interest rates? Are we going to do level payments or principal payments? So there's some key decisions that are still required that'll come next week. So this is just really an estimate and another model to start to give you some visibility as to what the overall numbers are, right? In total, doing a phased approach to this, we believe will save the taxpayers several $1 million. Total cost, as mentioned, is somewhere in the mid-60s, right, as projected, and doing a phased approach for bonds with lower interest rates brings the total cost down to somewhere in the $57 million range. With that, there are some comparison estimates. Did you want to cover this?
Just kind of covered it too. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so single bond, multiple bond, the differences, and again, just another slide to compare and contrast the different options that the board will be evaluating next week. And with that, that concludes the slides and the presentation of the bond that we're going to be putting forth in March. Are there questions that we can help answer this evening? Please. You have to come up to the mic and please state your name and address.
Faye Oblinus, 15 Riverview Circle. Did I understand that you don't have a guaranteed maximum yet? So I'm not sure how that goes forward as a bond if you don't know what the guaranteed maximum will be.
So there's no guaranteed maximum yet. You're absolutely correct, and it's hard to have that with so many fluctuating parts that are still up in the air. Mm-hmm. However, the way I view it is if the voters are approving, I'm going to jump back to the warrant article slide. If the voters are approving a number of $38,617,870, right, and that's inclusive of state building aid, that's our guaranteed maximum. We can't go over that.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Carrie Douglas, 9 Pheasant Street. I appreciate that we're going to treat this as a GMP, but we had a GMP and we went over it. So to be able to say that, I don't think really gives us the true confidence that saying those words ought to. Because we had a GMP, we blew past the GMP on another project with the same bunch of consultants. So to be able to say that this guarantees it is not quite accurate. So
well,
thank
it's
you.
also not accurate. This is a completely different group, completely different architecture, right? All of that's new specifically to this project.
Okay.
You're right. There have been issues in the past. But at the end of the day, their voters are approving a very specific dollar amount. We have to stay within this dollar amount.
And we did that once before, and we didn't. And this number is much bigger to make a mistake on.
Any other thoughts or comments questions that we can help answer this evening? Okay, with that, I'll turn it back over to Chairman Ames.
Again, I want to take a moment to say thank you for coming out tonight. We appreciate those of you that came and asked questions. I did want to let those of you at home know and those of you in the audience know, unfortunately, Superintendent Jettie could not be here tonight. He has given me permission to share. He is isolating with COVID, unfortunately, for the entire week, which explains his absence. He is watching, so hi, Mike. But we want to go ahead and let you know why he's not here, but we want to thank Mr. Totten for going ahead and as our business administrator. As many of you know, Superintendent Jettie will be leaving at the end of the year, but Mr. Totten, please don't leave us, will be here and will continue to guide us through this process. So it's nice to have a familiar face who's familiar with the numbers and that will be a continuity as we continue to go forward. So again, thank you for coming out tonight. With that, I believe we can go ahead and adjourn for the evening. But please stay tuned because in 5 minutes, your budget committee meeting will be starting. So maybe a brief pause. Budget hearing, I'm sorry. Budget hearing will be starting. So time out for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah, we adjourned already, I'm sorry. But you can stay for the budget committee hearing and make a comment. Thank you.